The arena lights weren't even on her. She wasn't in a Fever jersey. She wasn't running a pick. She was sitting calmly on national television, smiling beside Reggie Miller, analyzing an NBA game like it was just another Sunday night. And then she detonated it. One name, Luka. The word didn't echo in the studio. It echoed in Indiana. Because when Caitlin Clark started praising Luka Doncic's ball dominance, the control, the usage rate, the way the offense bends around him, this wasn't harmless admiration. This was a philosophical grenade thrown in prime time. She didn't hesitate. She didn't soften it. I love how everything runs through him. Everything runs through him, somewhere. Stephanie White had to know what that meant, because White has publicly criticized that exact style, ball-stopping, high-usage heliocentric offense. She's questioned whether teams flow better when one player dominates possession, and now her franchise, Cornerstone, the player who sells every ticket, fills every road arena, drives every rating spike, just told the basketball world that's exactly who she wants to become. On NBC. With millions watching. Clark didn't attack her coach. She didn't complain about touches. She didn't mention systems. She did something far more explosive. She revealed her blueprint, and it doesn't look like Stephanie White's system. Social media caught it instantly. Side-by-side clips, old White commentary resurfacing, analysts freezing mid-tweet, Fever fans asking the question they've been whispering for months. Is this a warning? Because when a generational star publicly aligns herself with a philosophy her coach has openly challenged, that's not coincidence. That's confrontation. Delivered with a smile. And this was only the beginning. Caitlin Clark didn't enter the WNBA quietly. She arrived like a pressure system. Ratings exploded. Arenas upgraded. Road crowds turned hostile before warm-ups even finished. She wasn't just a rookie point guard. She was a financial catalyst wrapped in a jersey. And from the very beginning, everything ran through her. At Iowa, she wasn't a piece of the machine. She was the machine. 30-foot pull-ups, cross-court lasers, entire defensive schemes warped around her gravity. The offense didn't apologize for her usage. It depended on it. Teammates thrived because she bent the floor until it cracked open. That style built her legend. But legends don't always fit neatly into new systems. When Stephanie White took control in Indiana, she didn't inherit a blank canvas. She inherited a phenomenon, a player whose identity was inseparable from the ball in her hands, a player fans paid to see orchestrate chaos by broad structure, motion, balance, shared touches, a philosophy forged in Connecticut, disciplined, egalitarian, system first. On paper, it made sense. In practice, something shifted. Clark's possessions thinned. The offense redistributed. Aaliyah Boston facilitated more from the elbow. Kelsey Mitchell operated off movement. The ball pinged side to side in beautiful patterns. But the electricity flickered. Fans noticed it before analysts did. The hesitation, the extra pass, the moments where Clark looked like she was waiting instead of attacking. Her usage dipped, the improvisation narrowed, the logo threes came less freely. And yet, publicly, Clark said nothing. She praised her teammates, credited the system, spoke about growth. But tension doesn't disappear. Just because it isn't voiced, it accumulates every time she was pulled after finding rhythm. Every time a possession ended without her touching the ball. Every time a motion set replaced a high pick and roll that once left defenders spinning. She adapted, because that's what stars are told to do. Adjust, sacrifice, blend, but the deeper truth sat quietly beneath the surface. Caitlin Clark was never built to blend. She was built to bend games to her will. And that's why Sunday night mattered. Because when she praised Luka, she wasn't just admiring skill. She was identifying with philosophy, with control, with responsibility. With ownership of tempo. That wasn't random. That was reflection. And reflection, when spoken out loud in front of a national audience, becomes declaration. Inside the Fever locker room, reactions were measured. No public comments, no dramatic confrontations. But players felt it. Because when a franchise star publicly signals she wants more control, even indirectly, it shifts dynamics. It raises questions about direction, about identity, about whose vision drives the future. Stephanie White isn't just coaching games. She's managing a generational talent whose ceiling might redefine the league, and generational talents don't quietly accept philosophical ceilings, they challenge them. The backstory isn't about disrespect, it's about inevitability too. Powerful basketball ideologies now share the same sideline. And when ideology collides with ambition under bright lights, something always gives. The moment didn't explode in the studio. It detonated afterward. because while Caitlin Clark's Luka comments were still looping across sports feeds, an old clip resurfaced. Stephanie White on national television, dissecting the Mavericks.com. Analytical, direct, the ball sticks too much. White had said about Luka's usage, they're harder to guard when it moves. The edit was brutal. Clark praising heliocentric control on one side, White criticizing it on the other. Side by side. Philosophy versus philosophy. And suddenly, this wasn't interpretation, it was collision. Fever insiders went quiet. Reporters started texting sources. League analysts pivoted their segments from game breakdown to system tension. Because when a star publicly endorses a style, her coach has publicly rejected. The friction isn't theoretical anymore. It's documented inside Indiana's practice facility. The mood reportedly shifted the next morning. Nothing loud. No shouting match. No dramatic confrontation. But energy doesn't lie. Clark's reps were tighter. White's rotations sharper. Every drill carried an undercurrent. Teammates could feel the cameras even when there weren't any. Because this wasn't about one interview. It was about direction. And here's where the first shocking twist hit. A Fever staffer, speaking anonymously, revealed that internal conversations about Clark's usage had already been happening weeks before the NBC appearance. Concerns about maximizing her gravity. Discussions about whether the offense had overcorrected toward balance. In other words, the tension wasn't born on Sunday, Sunday just exposed it. That changes everything, because if the front office was already debating whether Clark needed more control, and then she goes on national television praising the very style under debate, that's not coincidence. That's alignment with a faction. Suddenly, this wasn't Clark versus White. It was vision versus vision. One camp believes sustainable success comes from shared responsibility, motion, discipline, predictability, in structure. The other believes generational talent demands risk, freedom, high usage volatility that can break defenses and occasionally break systems. Clark didn't call out her coach, but she didn't need to. By invoking Luka, she invoked a basketball ideology that directly contradicts White's public philosophy, and fans saw it. Social media didn't just trend, it fractured. Some accused Clark of subtle rebellion, others said she was finally asserting her identity. Fever supporters split into camps overnight. Team system versus team superstar. Then came the second layer of the twist. Caitlin liked a post. A simple graphic comparing her rookie post-Olympic usage spike, when Indiana surged, to her current distribution numbers under White. No caption. Just a like. That single tap sent analysts scrambling, because that wasn't accidental. That was awareness. And awareness, when visible, becomes message reinforcement. Inside the league office, executives began watching closely, not because of drama, but because of economics. Clark's highest viewed games historically correlate with her highest usage performances. The logo threes, the takeover quarters, the viral moments. Those moments shrink in a balanced system. Which raises a dangerous question. If the system dampens the spectacle, who absorbs the cost? Stephanie White isn't incompetent. She's accomplished, strategic, respected, but generational players don't orbit coaches. Coaches orbit generational players. And that's the uncomfortable power equation hovering over Indiana. The main conflict isn't personal. It's structural. Can a philosophy built on shared movement coexist with a player whose ceiling demands possession control, because the longer both try to compromise, the wider the crack becomes? And history in professional sports is clear about one thing. When a franchise star and a head coach fundamentally disagree on identity, organizations don't choose the clipboard, they choose the cornerstone. The first shock wasn't Clark praising Luka. The first shock was realizing she knew exactly what that meant. And now, every possession in Indiana feels like a referendum. The message has been sent. The question is how. Stephanie White responds. If the first shock was philosophical, the escalation was political. Because within 48 hours of the NBC clip going viral, something subtle but unmistakable happened. National analysts began asking the question on air. Is Indiana maximizing Caitlin Clark? That sentence alone changed the temperature. It wasn't fan speculation anymore, it was mainstream scrutiny. Segments that were supposed to preview upcoming matchups suddenly turned into debates about usage rates, play calling hierarchy, and whether White's system was muting a generational engine. That word, muting, stuck. Inside the Fever organization. The pressure wasn't loud. It was internal. Sponsors, monitoring, engagement metrics, broadcast partners, analyzing minute-by-minute retention during Clark's on-ball possessions versus off-ball stretches. The numbers didn't lie. When Clark orchestrates, viewership spikes. When she blends, it stabilizes. Stability wins games. Spikes sell leagues. And that's where the second major twist detonated. A respected insider reported that ownership had quietly requested a performance review of the offensive scheme heading into the All-Star break. Not a coaching review, a scheme review. That distinction mattered because it signaled something dangerous. White's philosophy was now under economic evaluation. When ownership starts measuring systems against spectacle, the conversation shifts from what wins to what grows. Clark didn't need to say another word. Her NBC message was echoing through boardrooms. Meanwhile, in the locker room, tension grew more personal. Aliyah Boston, central to White's post-facilitated motion, found herself caught in the crossfire. Teammates whispered about touches. Rotations tightened. Practices reportedly featured sharper exchanges over spacing and decision-making. Clark stayed composed publicly. No interviews escalating the situation. No dramatic social media statements. But body language doesn't lie. During one nationally televised game, cameras caught her after a fourth-quarter possession ended without her touching the ball. A quick glance toward the bench. A controlled exhale. No theatrics. The clip went viral anyway. Fans dissected it frame by frame. Then came the twist. Nobody predicted. Stephanie White responded indirectly. In a press conference, when asked about balancing star power with system discipline, she said, "Basketball isn't about one player. It's about trust and structure." That line ignited gasoline because while she didn't mention Clark, the timing made interpretation unavoidable. Trust in structure. Clark had just publicly admired a structure built entirely around one player. Two sentences. Two visions. Now positioned as opposites. League veterans weighed in cautiously. Some defended White, emphasizing sustainability and playoff viability. Others suggested that when you coach rare talent, rigidity becomes risk. The Fever front office faced a calculus problem. If they double down on White's system and Clark's numbers plateau, criticism intensifies. If they pivot toward Clark's heliocentric control and results fluctuate, White's authority weakens. Either way, alignment fractures. The second twist fully crystallized when rumors surfaced that Team USA evaluators were watching closely, not for politics, not for fit, because Clark's international future may hinge on her ability to operate in structured systems, the very systems she seemed to question by praising Luka. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Indiana, it was about trajectory, Clark's evolution versus institutional comfort, White's philosophy versus economic gravity. The escalation isn't loud confrontation, it's controlled instability. Every game now feels like a chess move. Every rotation, a statement. Every late-game possession, a referendum on who holds the steering wheel. The NBC comment didn't create this divide. It revealed it, and when revelations go public, they stop being internal matters, they become pressure campaigns. Indiana isn't just managing minutes anymore. They're managing optics, economics, and ideology. Because the second twist isn't that Clark sent a message, it's that the message reached places far beyond the locker room. And once ownership starts listening, philosophy stops being sacred, it becomes negotiable. The fallout didn't explode, it fractured quietly at first. Then everywhere at once. Sports media split into camps overnight. Former players went on podcasts dissecting body language. Analysts slowed down clips of Clark's NBC appearance like it was game tape from a playoff loss. Headlines weren't subtle anymore. Did Caitlin Clark just challenge her coach? That question alone destabilized the Fever's season. Fans weren't arguing about defensive rotations. They were arguing about authority. Clark's supporters claimed she was being restrained, that the system dulled her, that Indiana was prioritizing ideology over electricity. They posted side-by-side stats of her post-Olympic surge versus her current distribution. They tagged ownership. They demanded freedom. White supporters countered hard. They framed Clark's comments as naive, as ego creeping into team dynamics. They warned about burnout, predictability, playoff exposure. And right in the middle, Aliyah Boston. Teammates avoided the spotlight but felt the tension tightening. Every time Boston touched the ball at the elbow, social media dissected whether that possession should have belonged to Clark. Every time Mitchell curled off a screen, fans questioned if it came at the expense of a logo 3. The locker room didn't implode, but it cooled. Reporters noticed fewer smiles in post-games. Answers became shorter, controlled, measured. No one wanted to escalate what had already become combustible. Clark remained professional, but pressure shows in micro-expressions. A half-second pause before answering questions about offensive rhythm. A deliberate emphasis on trusting the process. The emotional toll wasn't dramatic, it was suffocating. Because now every decision on the court carried narrative weight. If Clark dominated the ball and the Fever won, it validated her NBC message. If she deferred and they struggled, it validated her critics. If White leaned further into motion sets, it looked like defiance. If she pivoted toward Clark, it looked like surrender. There was no neutral outcome. The league office watched carefully, not intervening, not commenting, but tracking engagement, measuring discourse, evaluating whether this tension boosted interest or destabilized brand cohesion. Ticket sales held strong. Ratings spiked slightly for the next nationally televised Fever game. Controversy, even intellectual controversy, sells. But something else shifted. Trust fans began questioning whether Clark and White were aligned behind closed doors, whether smiles masked disagreement, whether this was sustainable. Then came a moment that amplified everything. Late in a tight fourth quarter, Clark waved off a play call. Just once. Brief. But visible. The broadcast replayed it 3 times. White didn't react outwardly, but cameras caught her lips tighten. That clip became the week's defining image. Not because it was insubordination, but because it symbolized tension. Public fallout isn't always loud chaos. Sometimes it's slow erosion. Erosion of certainty. Erosion of narrative unity. The Fever were no longer just competing for playoff positioning. They were competing for philosophical clarity. And fans could feel it. Because when your franchise star sends a message on national television, and your head coach responds with structure language days later, every possession becomes psychological. The fallout didn't destroy Indiana, it destabilized it, and instability, when paired with generational talent and rigid philosophy, never stays quiet for long. The final twist didn't come from another interview, it came from a play call. Nationally televised. Fourth quarter, 2-point game. The Fever needed a bucket. The camera zoomed in as Stephanie White signaled from the sideline, a structured motion set, multiple off-ball screens, Boston flashing high post. Clark nodded. The play began. It broke down instantly. 10 seconds left on the shot clock. Clark took the ball at the top. And then she did it. She waved everyone out, not dramatically, not angrily, just a sharp flick of her left hand. Clear the side. Isolation. The arena buzzed before she even moved. High screen, defender trapped. Clark split it. One dribble hesitation. Contact, step back from 28 feet. Splash. The crowd detonated. But the real explosion wasn't in the stands, it was on the bench. Cameras caught Stephanie White standing, not celebrating immediately, but watching. Because that wasn't the call to action. That was the Luka blueprint Clark praised on NBC. Ball in hands. Game in control. System overridden, and it worked. After the timeout, reporters noticed something subtle. White leaned in close during the huddle. Clark listened. No visible conflict, no tension. Just intensity. The Fever won that game. Clark finished with her highest usage rate of the season. And the next morning, something unprecedented happened. Stephanie White addressed it directly. "We trust Caitlin to make reads," she said carefully. "Great players take ownership in big moments." Ownership, that word echoed differently now. Because weeks earlier, she'd emphasized structure. Now she emphasized ownership. That wasn't contradiction. That was adjustment. Here's the twist nobody expected. White began integrating more high pick-and-roll sets in subsequent games. Spacing shifted, tempo quickened, Clark's touches increased. Boston's facilitation didn't disappear, it evolved. The system didn't collapse, it recalibrated. Which raises a dangerous realization. Maybe Clark's NBC message wasn't rebellion. Maybe it was leverage. And maybe White wasn't rigid. Maybe she was testing, because generational stars and accomplished coaches don't always clash to destroy each other. Sometimes they clash to redefine hierarchy. But here's the cliffhanger. What happens when this recalibration hits adversity? When Clark forces isolation late and misses, when motion stalls because the ball sticks, when playoff defenses adjust. Will White revert to structure? Will Clark double down on control? Or will ownership step in if the spectacle dips? Because right now, Indiana looks aligned. But alignment, forged through tension, is fragile. Clark sent a message on national television. White heard it. Adjusted. But adjustment under spotlight isn't resolution, it's negotiation, and negotiations in professional sports rarely end quietly. They escalate the moment. Winning stops masking philosophy that the Fever survived the first confrontation. The next one won't be theoretical. It will be postseason. And that's when we find out whether this was evolution or the beginning of a power shift no one can contain. Now, the real question isn't whether Caitlin Clark sent a message. She did. The real question is what it means going forward. Was that NBC moment a subtle warning to Stephanie White? Was it a calculated declaration that she refuses to shrink inside a motion-heavy system? Or was it the beginning of a new era where coach and superstar evolve together under pressure? Because this isn't just about usage rates, it's about power, it's about identity, it's about who defines the Indiana Fever moving forward, the system, or the phenomenon. Drop your honest take in the comments. Do you think White should fully unleash Clark? Or does structure win championships when the spotlight fades? And if the next playoff run exposes cracks in this uneasy balance, who does the organization choose? The architect, or the engine? Hit like if you believe this tension is shaping the future of the WNBA. Subscribe if you want every behind-the-scenes shift, every strategic adjustment, every power move broken down in real time. Because this story isn't over. It's just entering the phase where decisions stop being philosophical and start becoming permanent.